Well, hello. My name is Angel Wood, and this is Crime of the Truest Kind. Hey, everybody. I feel like I'm racing to get everything done. I have a rescue baby, a rescue puppy that it came on very quickly. Can you hear her? She has burrowed herself under a dog bed and is like barking at it or growling at it or doing some sort of puppy thing at it. It's a lot of fun, but I got to tell you, she's really been giving me a run for my money these last 2 weeks since she got here. How is everyone? Thank you for listening. Thank you for all your great comments and responses and reviews. A lovely review came in, I think just today. Did I post it already? Yes, in Instagram stories. That's where I usually put them. One of the best true crime podcasts I have heard. I am from New England, so I find it even more interesting. I love her narration style and can't wait to hear more. That is so lovely. 5 stars, my favorite. Thank you to NLC0429. You're the best. Drop a review at Apple Podcasts. I love them. Oh, that's Poppy, everybody. She's attacking a piece of fuzz. So I had something much different planned for today's episode. There was so much true crime news and discoveries over the last couple of days. I pivoted quite a bit over the last week on what I was going to do. On today's episode, episode 46, an update on the Elijah Lewis of Merrimack, New Hampshire case, humanizing the women who are the Gilgo Four, 2 of whom are from New England, and true crime headlines making news this week, local and national. Is that the name of this episode? Big crime news headlines. I don't know. The trial in the case of Alissa Turney in Phoenix, Arizona came to a shocking and abrupt halt on Monday when the judge overseeing the trial excused the defendant. I was stunned, and just about everyone in the true crime orbit and otherwise was stunned. Michael Turney, Alissa's stepfather, has been acquitted of murder charges in connection with her presumed death. Now, Alissa was 17 when she disappeared on May 17th, 2001. It was her last day of school for her junior year at Paradise Valley High School in Arizona. The Maricopa County Superior Court Judge Sam Myers, at the request of the defense, threw out the case against Michael Turney, citing Rule 20, which dictates that an acquittal must be delivered if there is no substantial evidence to support a conviction. Now, since she disappeared, Alissa's cold case was breathed new life through the work of her sister, Sarah Turney, who created the podcast Voices of Justice in an attempt to learn what happened to her older half-sister. It is simply unfathomable to know that this family has to deal with this. We woke up to the news last Friday morning that the Gilgo Beach 4 suspect, often referred to as the Long Island serial killer or LISK, was taken into custody. Huge news that comes 12 years after Shannan Gilbert went missing. Now, as I told you, I had a very different plan for this episode. And the more I read about the women involved in this case, the more I wanted to talk about them in terms of being human beings, rather than only being remembered by the worst decisions they've ever made. Look at me and tell me you've never made a bad decision, and I will tell you, you are full of shit. Shannan Gilbert was 23 and an aspiring singer and a possible victim of this serial murderer. She disappeared from Oak Beach on May 1st, 2010. Now, Oak Beach is up Ocean Parkway about 5 or so miles up the barrier island. Maybe you're familiar with Jones Beach. This is on the other side of that barrier island. It is remote and dark at night. Shannan's mother, Mary, was a devoted advocate to her daughter. But tragedy struck 6 years later when Mary was murdered by her other daughter, Sarah, who, according to her attorney, was diagnosed with schizophrenia and had been hospitalized before her mother's murder. Now, prior to her death, Mary Gilbert had been fighting to get Shannan's case reopened as a homicide. Shannan's death has been called accidental and remains unclassified still. She called 911 that last night she was seen, saying she was being chased by someone. Maybe you've heard the audio. I am not going to play it. There is a strong reason to believe that she is a murder victim. Even Dr. Michael Bowden, famed forensic pathologist, said she could have been strangled. Her hyoid bone was damaged. The search for Shannan Gilbert led to the discovery of the Gilgo Four. And if not for Shannan, it is possible they might never have been found. Melissa Barthelemy, Megan Waterman, Amber Costello, and Maureen Brainard-Barnes. They are the women who are called the Gilgo Four, real-life human beings. And 2 of these 4 women are from New England. Maureen was the first to go missing, July 2007. She grew up in Connecticut, the part of the state that is the land of foxwoods and Mohegan Sun. 2 casinos that prop up the economy. Or do they? I'm not even sure. Maureen was 25 and living in Norwich. She is believed to have taken an Amtrak train from New London to Grand Central Terminal in Manhattan on July 6, 2007. She was a straight-A student who filled notebooks with poetry and song lyrics. She had a baby at 17, worked as a blackjack dealer for a time. She did retail, and then when she saw the offer for "You can be a model," she went for it. And that led to placing ads on Craigslist for dates. She was dealing with being evicted from her place and worried about a costly custody battle for her son. She was last seen at 59 West 46th Street in Manhattan, the Super 8 Motel in Times Square. Just before midnight on July 9th, she spoke to a friend and told her that a client was picking her up outside the motel. Maureen was never seen again. Melissa Barthelemy grew up in Buffalo. She spent a little time in Texas and made her way to the Bronx. She would disappear 2 years after Maureen on July 12, 2009. Melissa was last seen at her basement apartment at 1149 Underhill Ave in the Unionport section of the Bronx. She was just 4 feet, 10 inches tall, and 24 years old. Melissa was a licensed cosmetologist, and after working her way through a few salons, she moved to the Bronx in 2007 with the goal of starting a salon of her own. She just needed some money. Sex work was fast money. I wouldn't call it easy, but it is also something that becomes very difficult to get away from for various reasons. After Melissa was Megan Waterman. She was last seen on June 6, 2010. Megan was a regular girl. And what I mean by that is when you see her photos, she looks like someone you would work with, see at the gym and the coffee shop, picking up their young daughter from school. She had a little girl, Lily, who's a teenager now. There was nothing to indicate that she was traveling from her home in Scarborough, Maine, to New York City to work Craigslist and Backpage dates. She kept this secret, not letting on that this is what she was doing. Her family has said that they believe she was brought into this lifestyle by her boyfriend at the time, that she was being forced into sex work, and that she was being threatened by him. Her mom, Lorraine, said Megan was fun and caring and a loving mom who wouldn't ever leave her daughter. Of the 4 women called the Gilgo Four, Amber Lynn Costello was the last to disappear. Her last known sighting was in North Babylon, Long Island, on September 2nd, 2010. At 27, she was having a rough go of it. And I wish I knew more about the kind of life Amber wanted to live. Her sister Kimberly spoke honestly, and it was painful to hear. And she does not try to sugarcoat their story. Amber and Kimberly grew up in Wilmington, North Carolina. They spent some time in Florida, and then Amber landed on Long Island, a short drive from Gilgo Beach. Kimberly said she had introduced her to the practice, saying that in the beginning, you make the money, and you're making it without the drugs and without the bullshit, and then you get addicted to the money. When she first moved to Suffolk County, Amber made a lot of money, about $3,500 a week. In 4 months, it doubled. Her sister Kimberly said they traveled up and down the East Coast, working with an escort agency. But eventually, Amber switched to Craigslist. Kimberly was getting out of the business. But Amber, she was now managing a terrible drug habit. And her sister said she was making up to 5 calls a night. These 4 women were all petite in size. All of them were involved in sex work at the time. This cannot be the only thing people say about them. Because of their size, and because of the work that they were doing, it made them most vulnerable to violence. Other women would be found and included in the Lisk body count. The partial remains of Valerie Mack were found on November 19, 2000. She was 24 when she went missing. Family members last saw Valerie in the spring or summer of 2000 in Port Republic, New Jersey, where she grew up with her adoptive family. Her family did try to report her missing, but their request was dismissed by police, likely because Valerie was an adult. And they were probably aware that she was a sex worker. That isn't clear. But Valerie had reportedly been arrested on a few occasions. The Mack family adopted Valerie when she was 9 years old. She did well in her family. She had siblings. But as she grew older, trouble would surface. Part of her was found because she was dismembered, wrapped in several layers of garbage bags, then dumped in the brush off an access road. Her torso was all authorities had for years, and her identity was only the Manorville Jane Doe, or Jane Doe number 6, because of the area of Manorville, New York, where she was first recovered. 10 years later, more remains of Valerie were found near Gilgo Beach during a search for Shannan Gilbert. On April 4, 2011, Valerie's skull, hands, and right foot were found in a plastic bag on Ocean Parkway in the vicinity of the other Gilgo women. No personal possessions, identifying items like a pocketbook, jewelry, or clothing were found with her. Many years would pass, 19 in fact, from the time Valerie's remains were first found, for her to finally have an identity again. Valerie Mack, who often used the name Melissa Taylor, was ID'd through the advances in DNA technology. Suffolk County Police were able to use a public genealogy database to find a DNA match to relatives' on-file genetic material. That search led them to a biological aunt. She was one of 7 sisters. One of her sisters was Valerie's biological mother. After reaching that aunt, investigators eventually reached Valerie's adoptive family and her son, who's now in his 20s, and whose DNA was a match for Valerie's. Through this process, we learned that Valerie was in foster care and then adopted twice. She was the youngest of 5 biological children, who were all removed from their parents by CPS in New Jersey. She was adopted by the Macks around 9 years of age. Both of her biological parents are dead now. She lived in New Jersey but spent time in Philadelphia, and no one is quite sure how she ended up in Long Island. Her adoptive sister Angela said in interviews that Valerie was on track to turn her life around shortly before she disappeared. She had a retail job, was seeing her son Benjamin again, and wasn't using drugs. When she disappeared, her family was worried, And when she was found in New York, they believed she did not go willingly. Working with the FBI, this was the first time New York authorities were successful in cracking a cold case using a genealogy website. The details about Valerie's murder are similar to that of Jessica Taylor, another young woman believed to be a victim of the Long Island serial killer, or one of the many other names this predator has been given: the Gilgo Beach killer, the Manorville butcher, the Craigslist ripper. No one ever gets a name like piece of shit, poor excuse for a human being predator. I think we should rename all of them like Stumpy Dick Nick, or I don't know, I'll have to work that out. Jessica Taylor, first identified as the girl with the angel tattoo, for the image of a heart with wings that read Remy's Angel, reportedly the pimp. Now, I don't know of another word that better describes the role these people have other than pimp. But I will say something honestly here. I really don't give a shit if there's a PC word for a pimp. A pimp is a pimp. It's not a positive role model. Jessica had just turned 20 when she went missing in July 2003. And much like Valerie, her partial remains were found, discarded on the side of a paved access road in Manorville. She had been dismembered and only her torso was found, on a sheet of plastic, discarded out in the open. They didn't even try to conceal her. Her killer gouged out her tattoo. Was it so she would be more difficult to identify? Or was it because they didn't like it? Or what it said? Her identity would eventually be confirmed through DNA. I am taken with this story. The more I learn, the worse it feels. The brutality these women experienced. And let me be clear, no one deserves this. Not someone addicted, not someone whose kids were taken away, not someone experiencing mental health issues, not someone involved in sex work. Thousands of women every day are trafficked into this lifestyle. But this is not about the phenomenon of sex work. This is about these women and how men target and abuse and mutilate and kill people like them that they decide no one cares about. It is simply not true. Like Chance the Rapper sings, everybody's somebody's everything. Nobody's nothing. There appears to be a different MO among these victims. Some were dismembered, butchered, their remains deposited in different areas across a number of years. But we don't know everything investigators know, and we shouldn't. The Gilgo 4 women are connected through the state of their remains, tied up in burlap. Also, forensic DNA links the 4. And there is considerable digital evidence through cell phone data and mapping. And what I've been able to learn over the last few days, this is what made it easier for authorities to get to the bottom of this case and find this predator. Technology is far more advanced in terms of the cellular information that we are able to gather. There is a difference of opinion among investigators. Some investigators will tell you that one person committed all of these murders. Other investigators will say there were several different killers. This part we know. Gilgo Beach became a dumping ground. An unidentified Asian male believed to be between the ages of 17 and 23 was found, and the remains of a still unidentified female child near where Valerie Mack was found. And that child was approximately 2 years old at the time of their death, not related to Valerie Mack. Later, it would be learned that the child matched DNA of an unidentified woman simply known as Peaches. In 1997, the body of a woman was found, while the remains of a woman, a torso, and a black garbage bag that was stuffed into a Rubbermaid container. Also in that black garbage bag, a floral pillowcase and a red towel. Her partial remains were found in Hempstead Lake State Park in West Hempstead on Long Island. The rest of her body, head, arms, legs, were never found. The only identifying mark on this woman was a heart-shaped peach tattoo on her left breast. Peaches has not been identified, and her killer has not been found. That means that toddler has also not been identified. How is it that no one is looking for them? The suspect, 59-year-old Rex Howerman, a New York City architect, a Long Island native, and resident of Massapequa Park, a father, a husband. He lives in his childhood home that he bought from his mother. He is charged with the murders of Melissa Barthelemy, Megan Waterman, and Amber Costello. He is also considered the prime suspect in the murder of Maureen Brainard-Barnes. As for Valerie Mack and Jessica Taylor, we must be patient, even longer. I know, it has been 20 years. The accused is scheduled to appear in court on August 1st. And I should say this, everyone is innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. I understand your feelings. Now, when something like this happens, everybody asks about the family. Who knew? What did they know? What did they not know? It was reported that his wife filed for divorce, has not made any public statements or appearances, and has not been seen in the area of their Long Island home. Not one person could blame them. Their home in Massapequa Park is being thoroughly searched, every item combed over. Vehicles have been impounded. Investigators have gone to other properties the Howermans own in other states. I truly believe that this is equally horrifying for this man's wife and children as it is for the public to hear this. And Shannan Gilbert's mom isn't the only mother who can no longer advocate for her daughter. Megan Waterman's mom, Lorraine Ela, died on August 8, 2002, back home in Laconia, New Hampshire. Not even one whole year before her daughter's alleged killer was apprehended. Back home in Newton, Massachusetts, a city that was in the news for the murder of 3 family members just a few weeks ago, a call came from a home where a mother of 3, Nancy Hanson, 54 years old, was found last Saturday, July 15th, suffering blunt force injuries to her head and body. She was taken to Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston, where she died later that night. Her death has been ruled a homicide. Reporting officers found a bloody baseball bat and a weighted bar near where she was discovered. There is a record of domestic violence in the home, and more recently, Nancy had filed a restraining order against her husband in the days before she was found. It was determined she suffered breaks to her skull, arms, and several ribs, and other injuries were present. Even more disturbing, her 3 children were at home at the time. The suspect, Richard Hanson, 64, reportedly the husband and father of the children, was found at the scene and is in custody, charged with murder, assault, and battery, causing serious bodily injury, armed assault with intent to murder, and assault and battery on a family or household member. According to a Boston NBC 10 report, Nancy Hanson obtained a restraining order against her husband, and she reported other instances of controlling behavior, all warning signs advocates say people should be aware of. Her order outlined what was happening. She wrote that her husband would not let her go out without him, and that for more than a year he had denied her access to their finances. These are clear-cut signs of domestic abuse, which can be very confusing and insidious, especially if you are the one in the middle of it. I am happy to report this part. Her children are together, they are safe, and they are with a family member now. What they witnessed that night, and like many nights before, will stay with them. There are many resources available for people experiencing domestic abuse. And no, it is not simple or easy to just go. Never say that to someone, "Why don't you leave?" That is thoughtless. For support, contact the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-SAFE, 1-800-799-7233. You can also visit thehotline.org or text LOVE IS to 22522. And finally, the affidavit in the case of Elijah Lewis was released after WMUR Channel 9 in Manchester, New Hampshire, filed a motion to have it unsealed. Elijah is the 5-year-old Merrimack, New Hampshire boy who was missing and found with the help of cadaver dogs, buried in a shallow grave at Ames Knoll State Park in Abington, Massachusetts. We learn the lengths that his mother and her boyfriend took to hide his disappearance. It answers the question as to how investigating officers found out he was missing. The affidavit had been sealed since the arrests of Danielle Dufresne, 37, and Joseph Stapp, 32, on October 19, 2001, in New York City, where they were found and picked up after they were wanted for questioning in Elijah's disappearance. They ran. I cover Elijah's story in episode 37. According to the affidavit, employees with the New Hampshire Division of Children, Youth, and Families, or DCYF, and members of the Merrimack Police first learned of Elijah's disappearance after his mother gave birth to a baby boy that would be Elijah's half-brother. The couple reportedly have a daughter also. The boy was a home birth in Merrimack, where the two lived in October 2021, and the boyfriend took the baby to Catholic Medical Center in Manchester to turn over custody through the state's safe haven law. Now, safe haven laws vary by state, and in New Hampshire, parents are allowed to leave an infant child who is less than 1 week old at a hospital or a safe haven destination. Safe haven means a church that is attended by a person, or a police or fire station that is attended by a person, or a 911 responder at an agreed transfer location, and shall take temporary care and control of a child not older than 7 days without a court order if the child is delivered to the hospital or safe haven by its parent with intent not to return for the child. After accepting custody, the hospital or safe haven shall ensure that medical services necessary to protect the health and safety of the child are made available to the child. Parent or parents relinquishing their child may not be required to disclose any information regarding their identity. Wow. I knew this, but it's still fascinating to read it. During intake at the hospital, the boyfriend did not provide any identifying information. He doesn't have to by law. This was included in the affidavit. Hospital staff filed a report with DCYF, which led DCYF to file child abuse and neglect orders against them both because this infant was born drug dependent. They allegedly told police that they had recently relapsed and dropped the baby off to get the care he needed, and because they did not want to get DCYF involved out of fear they could lose custody of their 2-year-old daughter. It's heartbreaking to know that another toddler is involved in this mess. Once a DCYF employee followed up, they realized Elijah wasn't listed in her care. Dufresne initially told investigators Elijah was living with her sister in California, and then he was with her brother in Texas. Which is it? The couple were living with the boyfriend's mother. The mother allegedly told investigators conflicting stories about when she last saw Elijah and where she thought he was. She initially said the boy had been taken to a hospital for treatment for behavioral issues, but later said she thought he was in Texas. That's interesting. She would tell police it had been weeks since she last saw Elijah. And according to the court paperwork, both Dufresne and Stapp told his mother not to tell anybody about Elijah. During a search of the home, investigators found an unsigned affidavit from the New Hampshire Department of Health and Human Services for temporary guardianship of Elijah to be granted to Dufresne's sister, who had expressed interest in caring for the boy in the past. There wasn't a single trace of Elijah inside that home. When police searched, they found a trash bag full of boys' toddler clothes. That's it. This led police to believe there was evidence Elijah no longer lived in the Merrimack home and that he had been harmed. This is when authorities went after Dufresne and Stapp, but they had already bolted. What does that suggest to you? The affidavit states that Elijah died between September 21st and September 24th, 2021. We know that the autopsy showed he died of violence and neglect, and that his manner of death was a homicide. 5-year-old Elijah, Eli, as he is often called, was beaten, starved, isolated, denied clothing or blankets for comfort, He was left alone to stand in a room for hours at a time. The abuse of this child was so bad that it was evident in his appearance. One text heard during the boyfriend's trial, where he told Dufresne they needed to feed Elijah and let him sleep so he would look better so they could go out and do things. But Dufresne responded that she didn't want to do that. So instead, they tortured a 5-year-old boy, murdered him, and buried him in a shallow grave. The boyfriend was charged in Elijah's death. In September 2022, Joseph Stapp pleaded guilty to manslaughter, second-degree assault, falsifying physical evidence, and tampering with a witness. He was sentenced to 22 to 45 years in prison. Dufresne was indicted on 1 count of first-degree murder and 1 count of second-degree murder in her son's death. She pled not guilty and is scheduled to go to trial in January 2024. We can only hope. There was a great deal more to the story that I did cover in episode 37. Please go back and listen to it. I did tell you that I had a very different plan for this episode. My plan for upcoming episodes is to get case updates and do some follow-up on the many unsolved and unknown cases of missing and murdered people in Massachusetts. And I will. And here is a short list of some of those names. Names we need to continue to say. Deanna Kremen, Somerville. Melanie Melanson, Woburn. Charlene Rosemond, Everett. Karina Holmer, Boston. Rita Hester, Alston. Kaya Donovan, Everett. Paul Christian, Lowell. Brittany T., Brookfield. Soraya Hayward, Hyde Park. Bruce Crowley, Provincetown. Adam Watchholder, Falmouth. Holly Paranen, Sturbridge. The 30-year anniversary of her murder is coming up on August 5th. Please think of her family. Holly Paranen was found, but her murder remains unsolved. There are a great many names to add to this list, and I fully intend to advocate for these families in Massachusetts. And before I go, I want to say this. As a member of the true crime space, I feel a responsibility to support these families whose stories we share. Because they are not our stories, we borrow them in good faith. We must take good care of them. On Tuesday, August 15th, the New Hampshire Coalition of Families of the Missing and Murdered will meet in Concord, New Hampshire. I plan to attend to add my voice to strengthen theirs. With over 130 active missing persons and murder cases that remain unsolved in New Hampshire, the Coalition of Families are insisting that the Attorney General improve communication, reform the victim advocacy program, and secure justice for the victims. The stagnation of the investigations, communication gaps, and shared sense of apathy is the impetus behind these devastated families banding together. The group will gather at the Attorney General's office at 33 Capitol Street in Concord, New Hampshire, August 15th, 2023 at 11 a.m. Families, advocates, and supporters are all welcome to attend. You can read more about this. I will share it at crimeofthetruestkind.com and directly from its source at MauraMurrayMissing.org. This is the event that I was talking about with Julie Murray on the last episode, on episode number 45. Thank you for listening. This is definitely one of my shorter episodes. I have the new baby puppy, who I am sure has made noise during the recording of this episode. And we are leaving town in hours, and I am completely unprepared for going away. So stay safe, keep in touch, follow Crime of the Truest Kind everywhere at Crime of the Truest Kind, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, Twitter. Oh, it is on SoundCloud, and of course on all podcast listening platforms. Drop a tip in the jar. Thank you to all my fantastic Patreon patrons, including superstars Lisa McColgan, Rhiannon, and Heather B. I appreciate you all. Please leave a 5-star review, my favorite kind, on Apple Podcasts. If you listen on Spotify, you can give a rating. Can't write a review on Spotify, unfortunately. I have said enough. Until next time, lock your goddamn doors.